Have you ever felt like you should get the credit for your child's science fair project or state report? We think that fourth and fifth graders should be able to plan, organize, manage their long term projects. But the brain isn't developed enough at that point for any of these things to be automatic for them. Maybe you have a teenager who's driving you crazy because she's disorganized. She never cleans her room. She's always late. She avoids getting started on homework, puts projects off until the very last minute, has no sense of time, refuses to write down her assignments in her planner, doesn't care about her work, and just rushes to get through it. Believe me, you are not alone. Today, we're going to talk about executive function, the self-management system of the brain. This is LD Expert Live. A friend of mine was telling me about how he came home from work one day and it had been a long day and his 6-year-old son was running around being childish and annoying. And he heard himself say, "Stop acting like a child." And then he thought, oh, wait, he is a child. We want kids to act like kids. I mean, their exuberance and laughter and energy and wonder is a gift. But then we want to add the caveat that they also focus, think, plan, organize, make good decisions, have self-control, and evaluate and learn from their mistakes. In other words, we want kids to be kids with the benefit of great executive function skills. Here's the problem. These skills are frontal lobe functions that develop throughout childhood, but the frontal lobe develops last in our brain. So the major growth in executive function occurs in the teens through the mid-20s. Today, Lauren Ma will be joining me to talk about what parents need to know about executive function and how to build it in your children. Welcome to LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning differences, dyslexia, and attention challenges. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers and author of At Wit's End, A Parent's Guide to Ending the Struggle, Tears, and Turmoil of Learning Disabilities. This book was written for parents to help you understand your bright but struggling students and the underlying skills such as executive function that support ease in learning and school. To get a free copy, go to parentsatwitsend.com. I want to reintroduce you to Maddie Leno and Lauren Ma from our Stowell Learning Center team. Maddie is a clinician and team leader at Stowell Learning Center in Irvine, California. She'll be moderating the chat for us today. Lauren is our Director of Clinical Growth and Operations for Stowell Learning Centers. She is joining me today for our discussion on executive function. Good morning, Maddie and Lauren.
Good morning.
Good morning and welcome to all of our viewers. We actually already have a few people checking in to say hi. Hi, Mona. How's it going? And hello. Hi, Karen. Excited for this topic. So yeah, we love to hear from everyone. Be sure to say hi. Let us know where you're checking in from. And of course, post your comments and questions. We'll be answering them soon.
Great. And you voted and we listened. We had almost 9,000 votes. And for our best of show, we had a poll voting for our best of 2020 episode of LD Expert Live. The competition was fierce. And so we'll be sharing highlights from all of our finalists on our best of 2020 fan favorite episode as voted by you. That show will air on January 5th, 2021. So that is going to be really fun. I'm looking forward to seeing our past guests and just kind of, going back and reliving what they shared with us. So that's going to be a really fun show. We have a resource for parents. We have lots of resources for parents, but one of them is Mom Squad. That is a private Facebook group that we have for you parents. You can join by searching in Facebook groups, SLC Mom Squad. and request to join, or find the Mom Squad link on our Facebook page. That is a private Facebook group of parents with kids or teens with learning and attention challenges. You're welcome to join. We share resources. I repost some resources from our past guests. It's a place to ask questions. You can ask questions anonymously. A lot of people PM me directly to ask questions about our upcoming shows, if they have a question for an upcoming show. So you can do that through Mom Squad, or ask questions of the members to get some feedback from other parents. And in Mom Squad, upcoming is going to be our PEACE meeting. PEACE stands for Parent Enrichment and Continuing Education. That is our support group that we have for you parents. A little bit different format than this LD Expert broadcast. I moderate that. It is a discussion format. We're going to hold it through Zoom and broadcast it through Mom Squad only, not on our main Facebook page, but Mom Squad only. So you want to make sure that you join that so that you can see that broadcast. PEACE is a great place to really dig into topics. Like today, we're talking about executive function. We go through Jill's book, and we really have a chance to ask questions and have discussions about what each skill or what each topic looks like in your home. So our first meeting will be January 21st, 2021 at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Really looking forward to having that. When we had PEACE live in all 4 centers, we used to do them in person. It was just a great resource for parents, and a lot of parents really appreciated that. And now that we're remote, we can bring it to the world. So looking forward to that first meeting.
That's so awesome. I know that PEACE has been such an amazing resource for so many parents who are local, but now that, we're forced to be remote with certain things, it's just great that everyone can be included no matter where they live. So I'm really excited for that. And I know that executive function is such a hot topic for parents everywhere. I'm already seeing the chat light up. So keep posting your comments and questions, and Jill and Lauren will be answering those soon.
Perfect. Thank you, Maddie. Lauren, let's jump right in and talk about what parents need to know about executive function. So first, as I mentioned, executive function is a frontal lobe function, and the frontal lobe is actually the last part to develop in the brain.
Right. Like you said, most executive function development occurs in the teens or early 20s. And executive function doesn't fully develop until about the age of 25, which is why kids and teens often have trouble completing complex multi-part assignments on their own without parent help. And the sad thing is that schools sometimes require these skills of students before they can be expected to be in place. It's just not developmentally appropriate. However, that doesn't mean that executive function is non-existent until the teenage years. That's just usually when you can start to see that it's lacking in some kids. So executive function actually starts developing as soon as kids can start to think about future events, around about 2 years old, right when the pre-operational stage of child development begins. Executive function skills are starting to develop. So think about a preschool classroom. Think about preschool kids. Kids are taught to raise their hand before they speak. They're taught to line up and where they belong in line. They get to be the caboose at the back. They get to be the line leader. All of that is teaching executive function skills. They have to think about where their square is on the rug, inhibiting their behavior. So like keeping your hands to yourself, that's building executive function. Executive function is developmental. And so the skills should look different at different ages. We shouldn't expect a 7-year-old to have the same executive function skills as a 30-year-old.
Right. So executive function is the brain's mental manager, kind of like our own internal CEO. Executive functions are mental processes that we use to regulate our own attention and behavior and to manage our everyday lives through organization, time and space management, prioritizing, strategizing, and reasoning. There are 3 main processes involved in executive function: working memory, the ability to hold information on kind of like a mental sketch pad while you're thinking about it and working with it; inhibitory control, the ability to determine when to act and when not to; and cognitive flexibility, the ability to see and weigh alternatives. These processes work together to look at the current situation and consider courses of action to integrate past experiences and avoid impulsive reactions. They allow us to choose what to focus on and to hold that as a priority in order to maintain that focus. The second thing you need to know about executive function is that it relies on underlying skills.
Exactly. So let's look at our learning skills continuum. If you haven't seen this, I'll briefly go over it. Learning skills mirror brain development. So there at the top in the orange and red is usually where parents and teachers see struggles with academics or functioning, even behavior also can occur up at those higher levels in where kind of the orange and the red sits. But supporting those high level skills are lower level skills. So let's look at the bottom. So there in the green is core learning skills. There are most primitive motor and sensory skills. Difficulties at this level can look like attention challenges, coordination challenges, or regulation problems. And so a lot of times when parents come to us and they might see the symptom of executive function challenges or academic or behavior challenges, the root of the problem actually lies at that core learning level. A little bit higher up is processing skills at that blue level. That's where the brain processes sensory information. So these are automatic skills that allow you to take in information through your senses, work with that information, and produce an output. Skills like auditory and visual processing, memory, and processing speed are here. And then right there in the middle, in that purple, is as sort of a gateway to higher level functioning. That's where executive function skills sit. So these are skills that help us to reason with information, learn from our mistakes, and manage ourselves. And here's the thing, the brain is a resilient organ. Higher skills and abilities can develop in spite of other low-level skills not being in place, but it causes extra time, energy, and effort for the individual, and he or she may not reach his or her full potential. So when we look at where executive function sits, it not only relies on those solid underlying skills like memory or regulation, attention, comprehension, but it also impacts so many areas of functioning. And that is usually what parents are seeing when they call us. And here's the thing about executive function training. Parents always ask, what can I do? What can I do to build executive function? What can I do? If those underlying skills are not strong, if they're not in place, all of the tools and strategies that you try to do to develop executive function skills are going to fall short. And that's one of the major things I want parents to know, is that you have to have a solid network of underlying skills.
That is so true, Lauren. I remember a student. I remember a student who was 12 or 13 whose parents really thought that he had executive function problems because he got due dates wrong and he brought the wrong materials home and he often only completed part of his assignments. But when we tested him and as we got to know him, we realized, he actually had very good executive function skills, but he couldn't execute them because his auditory processing was so weak that he just wasn't getting accurate and complete information to think with.
Exactly. And sometimes we even see that superior underlying skills can even impede executive function skills. So we see kids a lot of times that have excellent memories, superior memories, photographic memories. And because of that, they never develop the habit of taking notes or using a planner. They think they don't need it because they're going to remember everything. Well, that will only serve them so far. Eventually it's going to catch up to you. And it usually does start to fall apart in high school or higher level classes. And here's the thing, high intelligence doesn't guarantee good executive function. And that's where most people get it wrong, especially with our gifted population or even our twice exceptional population. Parents kind of expect that, oh, he's smart, he should be able to do it. This should come naturally to him. These are a separate set of skills. It's a combination of underlying prerequisite skills that we talked about and learned habits and behaviors. Part is natural biological development and part is learned, where you have to develop some of these really good habits.
Absolutely. Well, that is great information, Lauren. Thank you. I'm going to give you a list of symptoms or characteristics that could be related to a weakness in any number of those underlying neurodevelopmental or processing skills. But if the underlying skills are in place and the student actually can do the work, poor executive function might be the culprit. If the student is having chronic difficulties executing daily tasks, such as organizing materials, setting schedules, keeping their room, desk, and backpack organized, getting started, staying focused on necessary tasks, sustaining effort to finish tasks. Maybe they misplace their papers, their school assignments, and other school materials, or they lose or forget where they put personal items. Maybe they seem lazy or unmotivated because they can do the work, but they don't. Executive function challenges also show up in a student's ability to manage emotions and social relationships. These students have difficulty holding off instead of impulsively jumping in to say or do something. They don't seem to learn from their mistakes. They may lack tact, and they may have trouble shifting mentally or emotionally to think about something or try something in a different way. If you're just joining us, I'm Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers. We've been talking about executive function with Lauren Ma, our Director of Clinical Growth and Operations at Stowell Learning Center. Let's check in with Maddie and all of you in the chat.
Hello, everyone. We have so many people saying hi. I'm so excited. I'm so sorry if I mispronounce any names, but we have Namita saying hi. Hello. We have Aslam. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing anything, saying hi. Hello. Christina from Olympia. She has a 15-year-old daughter with ADHD and autism who's actually watching with her today. Hello. We have someone from Boston. Hi, Meredith, checking in from Boston. Her 8-year-old has ADHD, and she says not the greatest executive functioning, so she's excited for this one. Awesome. Let's see. Jennifer's from Salt Lake City. Hi, Jennifer. Melissa from Chicago. Hello. We have Lisa, local from Irvine. Hi, Lisa. We have Aria commenting on the piece, meaning the At Wit's End book, saying she can't wait to read. Awesome. Hello. We have so many people saying hi. Carolyn from Hesperia. Hi, Carolyn. Hello, Jovi. Hi, Jovi. Ingrid from Pasadena, another Stowell Center local. Awesome. Ooh, she has a 14-year-old. Nice. We had a question from, it looks like Lisa. She was wondering the exact name of the Facebook group, Mom Squad. So just a heads up, we did post that, a direct link. So if you're curious about that, you can just click the link. And then she also has a 15-year-old. All right. Lots of, I think, learning disabilities. Okay. You're in the right place. And then we did have a question from Melissa. She was wondering if we help kids who are not local to California, and we do. I can attest to that. We actually do a lot of remote sessions. I have a student right now who's in Washington State. We recently assessed someone in Virginia. So if you're curious about that, you can call the number that's on the screen, and we can get you set up for a remote screening or assessment. Let's see. Tracy from Pasadena. And then she also says that she has Turner syndrome and thus have executive function issues as well. All right. Well, hopefully this show will be helpful for you, Tracy. We have our first question. My son procrastinates on his homework all of the time. And how do I know if this is just an executive function problem or if it's also relating to other underlying skills?
So like I've been saying, this is why we recommend that students do an assessment with us, because we have to look at those underlying skills to make sure that we are dealing with the correct root of the problem. The same symptoms could have different roots, and we want to make sure we're addressing the true cause of the challenge. Or again, you could be spinning your wheels. So that's what we try to determine. That, you know, kids come to us and they often have the same symptoms. And what we really do in our assessment process, not just to test kids and get scores, we really look to see where the challenge is stemming from.
Absolutely. There are so many different things that end up having the same type of symptoms. A clue maybe for you would be to just kind of notice, do they procrastinate more on some types of tasks than others? Or do they dig in more on certain things? Are there certain times of day that are better than others? Does reading or understanding seem spotty or difficult? Maybe sometimes we get kids that they really dig in on any kind of task that requires a lot of reading, but if they have a page of math, they're absolutely fine. So if you see some of those kinds of inconsistencies, it's probably an indication that there's some underlying things going on that are making those particular kinds of tasks difficult for them. But, as with the student I was talking about earlier, his auditory processing was so weak that he wasn't getting all of the information. But what it looked like was that he was, not paying attention, not writing things down. But there was the reason for that went back to a different root, which was auditory processing.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. And actually, we did just get a question about auditory processing, so I'll put that up. Tone saying that wrong. She says she's from Colorado. How is auditory processing disorder diagnosed? I have a 17-year-old struggling, and I think it's ADHD, but I'm questioning sensory and auditory issues. So any thoughts on that one?
So, that's really interesting because often someone with an auditory processing problem can be diagnosed as ADHD, because if you're not getting the information auditorily, you start to daydream or you start to do other things. We actually did a show on auditory processing. You can look back on the YouTube videos and you get an experience where you actually try it out and see how easily you lose your attention if you're not able to get the information auditorily. In terms of where to get it diagnosed, auditory processing disorder is diagnosed by an audiologist, and not all audiologists do that. So you have to specifically ask. It's certainly different than a hearing test. In terms of getting help for auditory processing, as Lauren mentioned, we do a functional assessment or screening with students, and we dig around and look at auditory processing in a lot of different ways so that we can see functionally what's happening and then address that issue specifically for that student.
Great, love it. Well, we have one more hello before we jump back into the content. Christina saying hello from Garden Grove, another local. She looks like she has a 17-year-old with autism and ADHD. All right, so be sure to keep saying hi. Of course, we'd love to hear from you, and leave your questions. We'll be answering some more later.
Great. Thank you, Maddie. And wow, it is just so fun to say hello to you all over the country. This is LD Expert Live. I'm here with Lauren Ma talking about 5 things parents need to know about executive function and how to build it. So number 1 was executive function is developmental. It really starts its major development around 11 or 12 years of age and isn't completely developed until about 25. So even though your teens look really grown up, remember that they don't yet have a fully grown-up brain. Number 2, executive functions rely on underlying skills. Number 3, like anything else, developing executive function skills takes practice. Now, my generation has been accused of being helicopter parents. You may fit that description too. We tend to hover over our kids. We want to make sure that everything goes perfectly, that they don't have to stumble. Or we're just so busy and we have so much to do that we feel like everything's going to fall apart if we don't orchestrate it all. Of course, we want the best for our kids, but when we micromanage, we end up doing their thinking for them and may actually get in the way of them building their own executive function. Number 4, executive functions and underlying supporting skills can be developed. Neuroscience research tells us that through targeted and intensive training, the brain can rewire itself to process information more effectively. We've found that when underlying learning or processing skills are in place, those skills like auditory processing that we mentioned, or memory, then specific development of executive function skills can lead to increased attention, organization, self-management, and success for students of all ages. And number 5, let's talk about 2 really critical components of executive function and how they can be developed.
Right. So I'm going to talk about there's 2 underlying skills that are often very hard to identify, but they're essential for supporting executive function skills. And they are visualization and verbal interlanguage. So this is why, again, I'm gonna say this again. This is why it's crucial when parents come to us concerned about their child's executive function that we do an assessment to see if these underlying skills need to be developed first. Because again, we could give them the best strategies, all the best strategies in the world, and we could be spinning our wheels if these 2 components are not in place and not solid for an individual. So I'm going to talk about visualization first. So another way to think about it is visual interlanguage. So what that skill is efficiently turning words into pictures. At the lower level, the lower level part of visualization is visual memory. At the higher level, it's creating one's own visual image, like predicting what something might look like or a future outcome. Okay, this skill is essential for comprehension. You can't memorize everything. That's why we have that saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Otherwise, if you try to memorize everything that you hear in, like, let's say a lecture, your memory is going to be stressed and you're going to miss parts of it. We use visualization to plan, to organize, to see potential outcomes. We use it to take perspective, and it's a huge component in mental flexibility. So you need to be able to create a picture and then change that picture when new information is provided. That's what mental flexibility is, cognitive flexibility. We need to be able to change our picture. And so think about how a student would use visualization. So a student needs to be able to visualize how a paper or project is supposed to turn out. A student needs to be able to visualize a schedule. That's an essential component for organization. And a student needs to be able to visualize like scenarios or outcomes. That's a huge component of social skills and tact. And so an example of kind of how visualization can impede executive function was a student that we had at the Learning Center. His name was Nicholas. He was 14 years old in 8th grade, and he tested with a very high IQ. He was about like 140 IQ. He performed really well on academic testing, but he was failing all of his classes. Okay. And even worse, so the reason his parents really sought us out is because even worse, he was constantly getting in trouble at school. And he would do things kind of like, he'd like walk past a desk or something, pre-COVID, and he would like knock over a stack of papers. And then, the teacher would get mad at him. Someone would get mad at him, like, hey, why'd you do that? And he would go, well, I didn't mean to. And everybody was like, no, you did. I just saw you do that deliberately. So we started working with him. We identified that he did have very weak visualization skills. He didn't visualize at all, actually. And when I was working with him, I asked him if he ever thought about what he was going to do before he did it. Did he ever make a plan? And he like looked at me like he was confused, and he was like, well, no, I like to live in the present. He couldn't visualize potential consequences to behavior. And so he would kind of do things impulsively to experiment of like what the outcome would be. So those stack of papers, what's going to happen if I flip them over? How is everybody going to react? He couldn't predict how that people would get angry at him for doing that. So we started working with him on visualizing himself doing an action before he did it. And it took some time. We had to really work with that skill. But before long, he started to be able to take perspective and predict how others would react if he were to do something. This was huge for his parents because he also had a diagnosis of autism. And so, those social skills were significantly impacted, but he started to be able to kind of have theory of mind, think about other people's reactions and actions and how they would respond to him. It was huge. So here's the test. If you suspect that your child might have weak visualization skills, here's the way you could test it. Okay. So first, always with kids, I would first ask them if they make pictures in their mind when they read or listen. If your child is pretty self-aware, they may say no or look at you kind of funny, like, what? If they're not really self-aware, you're going to need to explore further. And this is how you do it. So you get your child to picture something, ask them to make a picture or picture something generic. And so an example that I always use when I do trainings is a magician. Okay. You should have a stereotypical picture for a magician. You should be able to recall it instantly. Okay. So here's what I picture when I'm visualizing a magician. I picture a man in a black and white tuxedo, and he has a magic wand, and it's thin, it's black, and then it has white at the tip. And then the other hand, he's holding a top hat, and there's a rabbit inside. That's my picture of a magician. Did you notice where my eyes went? They went up. I'm accessing the visual part of my brain. Did you notice what my hands are doing? And I'm a gestures person because I visualize so well. We use gestures when we're picturing. So that's what you want to look for. If your child has strong visualization skills, you're going to see those clues. Their eyes go up and their hands starting to make gestures, and it's going to be a pretty vivid picture. This is what poor visualization skills look like. So ask your child to picture a magician. Remember when we were in Vegas and we saw that billboard of the guy with cards? Yeah, that's what a magician looks like. That's visual memory. So recalling something that had been seen. That's the lower skill. If that's what they go to, if they can only visualize things that they've personally seen, that means that visualization is probably impacted. Or another thing we see is a student gives just facts related to something. Oh, well, it's someone who can perform tricks of illusion. And a lot of times we see this in very verbose students. They'll give us all kinds of facts and they won't tell us what it looks like. No, that's an indication that visualization is weak. Or they're very vague. Well, it could be anyone if you kind of press them for what does it look like? Oh, it could be anyone, male or female. They could be wearing anything. I mean, who's to say? They're very vague. That means visualization skills are impacted. Okay. Compare those answers to my very solid picture of a magician. And here's the thing. I did this training for, at a staff meeting, a staff of 20, and I went around and everyone had almost the identical picture of a magician that I did, because it's a stereotypical image and we need to be able to recall it quickly in order to comprehend. Okay. So here's a strategy for you parents. If you find that your child has weak visualization skills, here's a strategy to help you build that with your child. This is part of the work, not at all of the work, but some of the work that we do at the Learning Center. So you start with building visual memory. So, and you have to take something concrete. So like a calendar. Okay. So you want to get your child to look at their calendar, take a picture of it, and then look up. Okay. Because that's where we visualize, or even better, anchor on the wall. Okay. Because when you have something concrete to point to, it aids in visual memory. So, okay, take a picture of your calendar. Got it? Okay. So let's draw our calendar on the wall. Okay. Here's Monday. Here's Tuesday. Here's Wednesday. Here's Thursday. Here's Friday. Great. What is due Monday at 2 p.m.? Oh, my English paper. Right. And can you see that that's an event right there? Like you have it on your calendar? Great. Let's put it right there. And you have to do this over and over and over again. This is not something that you can only do once or twice and expect that skill to be solid. You want to visualize everything. So every single day, have your child take a picture of their calendar, look up, put it on the wall, and ask about that. Oh, what's over here Friday at 3 p.m.? Oh, that's when I have swim class. Great. And just do that until you can really see that it's easy for your child to do. Then if you want to access the higher level skill of of self-generated visualization, so mental manipulation, then ask about what would happen if things started to move. And be like, oh, your English paper is due Monday at 2 p.m., but your teacher just gave you an extension and she moved it to Thursday at 10 a.m. Where would that be? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Oh, right here. That would be here. Can you put it on your calendar in your mind? Yeah. That's how you start to develop those higher level visualization skills. If visualization is hard, and we often see this with students that can't visualize right away, give them what you picture and use that language. Here's what I picture. See those columns for the days of the week, and start to build it with them, and then get them to repeat it. That is a strategy we use. Again, it's not going to be overnight. You have to do it over and over and over again in order for it to be innate and for it to become habit. But it is the way that you build visualization.
That visualizing on the walls is such a great tool for building visual memory, comprehension, and really starting to build that ability to mentally manipulate for problem solving and planning. And I just want to make one clarification. It's so easy for us to take pictures all the time, but when Lauren was talking about taking a picture, it's a mental picture. So look at your calendar, take a mental picture, look up, see if you can picture it up there, and anchor it on the walls. Great strategy. So we have visual inner language, and we also have verbal inner language.
Right. So verbal inner language is really your inner voice. It's literally talking to yourself. And that's a skill that we want to be solid if someone's going to have good executive function skills. The lower level skill is recalling what is heard. So that is auditory memory. The higher level skill is internally generating that language and using it to guide our thinking or our problem solving. Think about all the times you talk to yourself, especially you moms. I'm constantly, I got to remember, Cammie's lunch. And then, I need to make sure I write a note for, and Friday's pajama day, all of that. We're constantly talking to ourselves, usually in our heads. This skill is heavily tied to auditory processing and language skills. So it may be impacted if your child had or still has a language delay. It is an important part of self-guidance. It helps with impulse control, with mindfulness, with emotional regulation. Okay, so here's a test to see if your child has weak inner language. Have your child read a sentence to themselves, so internally, and tap the syllables as they say the words in their mind. Okay, so for example, if I had the sentence, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, I'm going to read it and I'm going to tap the syllables as I repeat it to myself in my mind. Could you hear the kind of how that sentence was supposed to be spoken? You should be able to hear the syllables. Because tapping the syllables while reading is activating the student's awareness of their inner voice. If a student cannot do this, or if it doesn't follow that typical speech pattern, like they're not hearing it in their mind, okay? If it's monotone, if they can't do it, or if it doesn't follow that speech pattern, inner language is probably weak, okay? So that's the way to check for it. Here is the strategy to develop it. And again, this isn't something you can do once or twice. This is something that you have to do over and over again. This is part of our cognitive training that we do at the Learning Center. The strategy is called listen, echo, tap, and then the higher level strategy is called read, echo, tap. Okay, so listen, echo, tap. First, we're developing that auditory memory. So you want to give your child directions or instructions, have the child say it in their mind to themselves, and then tap the syllables before they execute. So for example, you're telling your child, go upstairs and put your laundry away. Okay, and then have them go do it. If this is really hard, you could have them repeat immediately afterwards. But if you're working at the higher level, you want it to be internal. So tap and then do, okay? And you got to work it. You got to work it over and over again. But this way, you can make sure that your child is processing what you said before they execute. So we're working on that mindfulness, that awareness, we're inhibiting kind of that impulsivity. Okay. The next level, if we want to start to generate kind of internal language that's internally generated, is to get them to read instructions or directions and tap the syllable. So let's say your child is always really impulsive and they go to do their homework or go to do their schoolwork, they're doing virtual learning, and they never read the instructions at the time. You have them read the instructions and tap, and they can tap on the table, tap as they read. So that way you're making sure that they're internalizing that language as they read, and they're being mindful of what they read. Okay, you could do it with instructions for an assignment. You can do it with tests. A lot of kids, they're taking their tests on the computer now. And so have them read their instructions online on their online test and tap next to them. That way you make sure that they're actually internalizing that language. And again, doesn't happen overnight. You have to do it over and over again to build that skill.
There are many, many skills involved with executive function, but this concept of verbal and visual interlanguage is crucial. And because that's really how we mentally think things through. Mm-hmm. That was fantastic, Lauren. Thank you so much. Let's check in with Maddie and our viewers, and then I'm going to wrap up with a problem-solving strategy that you can use with your children and teens that will exercise and build their executive function and hopefully take a little bit of the burden off of you.
Great. We have a lot of awesome comments. The first one is from Christina. She said that first I'll preface this by saying these comments are all about like that visualization part. Mm-hmm. So she said, I had the exact opposite issue where I could imagine and picture things very well, but I had a hard time translating all that into words or be able to organize those images and thoughts into strategies to implement. And she called it feelings thoughts. And then my initial thought was like, oh, maybe she resonates more with the inner language piece as being a challenge. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
That is a component. So a component of visualization and comprehension is one, being able to turn words into pictures, and then also taking those pictures and being able to turn them into words. And that is the piece that it seems like she's lacking, and be able to organize those thoughts. Because the thing about visualization is that it's whole. It's not necessarily sequenced. If you look at a picture or you have a mental image in your mind, it's all things all at once. And a lot of times our creative dyslexic students think like that. They think in the whole. You can experience and you can see so many different things all at once. And sometimes it is very hard to sequence. So when we visualize with our students, like if we're reading a story and we're anchoring and we're building pictures on the wall, we really teach the concept of sequencing. What's in your first picture? Okay, now let's make a second picture. And what's in your third picture? And we actually physically sequence it on the wall to help with that organization.
Mm-hmm. Great. It's so helpful. I mean, the changes that you see, and you kind of take it for granted, but it's just amazing to see the change you can make with those tips. We had a comment from Ingrid. She was like, well, this is while we were talking about the visualization stuff as well. She says, OMG, you just described my 10-year-old son who has been diagnosed with ADHD. So I'm glad to hear that people are resonating with this. And then she mentioned that she's in Pasadena. Her daughter's actually a student with us, but she said that the visualization connection never occurred to her. And I think that's so true. It's like, again, going back to, we just like when you have these skills, you kind of don't think about what it would look like if someone didn't have them. So it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times parents experience a lot of frustration with telling their kids, 3 things to do, and their child does the first one and then that's it. Mm-hmm. And so using visualization can help with that too. It takes a little bit of time, but if you say, I'm going to tell you 3 things, I want you to picture them. Ready? Here's your first one. I want you to put your shoes away. Can you picture yourself picking up your shoes and putting them away? And then tell them the second one and talk about that. You can even anchor them on a blank space on the wall, picture them in sequence, as Lauren was saying, and then have your child tell it again. Oh, first I'm going to do my shoes, then I'm going to feed the dog, and point to their pictures on the wall. Locating an image somewhere supports memory. And even though this takes a little bit more time, it actually will end up with less frustration because they'll be able to execute better. And you're helping them build some really, really important skills.
Mm-hmm. That's actually so funny you said that. We just had a comment from Karen. She said that, we'll just move our heads up a little bit. Mm-hmm. My son did this training with Stowell. He now comes to me and talks through his assignments and tasks for the day, prioritizing as he goes. He's still learning how much time he needs to complete a task, but all assignments are completed on time this year. Oh, that's so awesome to hear.
Yay.
That's great. And then we had a question from Jennifer. She says, is visualization related to abstract thinking? My son is often described as a concrete thinker. Is this an indicator or another way of saying he is lacking in visualization?
Absolutely. So abstract thinking is that higher level visualization. It's being able to generate something that you haven't seen or experienced. And so, and if this skill is really secure for you, you should be able to easily do that. That is, if we read fantasy or, kind of like sci-fi, they're going to be describing things we haven't experienced in real life. And you should be able to visualize that and think about that. Or if somebody's describing a situation to you that you didn't experience yourself, you can be able to understand what they're saying because that abstract thinking. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, we see this a lot with our kids that are described as concrete thinkers or black and white thinkers. Absolutely, that higher level visualization is impacted. Think about that skill. You have a mental picture, and then you need to be able to efficiently change your mental picture. Mm-hmm. So one, create something that you haven't experienced before, and then be able to manipulate it is part of a high level visualization.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And then we had a question from Elizabeth. What can be done to improve working memory and processing speed in a highly gifted child, if that makes a difference?
Well, there is not a quick answer to that, but I will tell you, with working memory, using some of those tools that Lauren was talking about with visual and verbal inner language, I mean, those are key aspects. Those are working memory. I mean, that's the essence of it, that you are able to hold something in your mind while more information is coming in, and then be able to put that together, decide what to focus on. And so working with those skills is a very, very good way to start to work with working memory. And that calendar exercise that Lauren was doing on the wall, that's really great. I mean, it's working with mental manipulation and flexibility, but it's also solidifying memory because you're anchoring it, you're pointing to it, you're locating it somewhere. So those are great techniques to work on that.
All right.
I'll tell you a fun thing to work on speed a little bit, just to get used to it. But this is just one tiny thing. I mean, this is obviously not a one-time fix. There's a lot involved here, but attention and working memory really impact processing speed. That's really what's going on there. But just if you have a child who just tends to be sort of a slow mover, you might play with the idea of speeding up by taking a deck of cards and just having them deal out the deck of cards, and then kind of talk about how fast that felt, and see if we could just crank that up just a little bit and do it again, but do it a little bit faster, and start to build the feeling of a little bit more urgency. So that's just sort of a fun thing to do if you have a child that is just sort of a slow mover.
Mm-hmm. We call that aces, faces, odds, and evens. So, and it's fun. We play at the Learning Center. And so what you're doing is you're making 4 piles. You have the cards, the child has the card in their hand, upside down, the deck, and flips it over. Is it an ace? Is it a face card? Is it an odd card? Or is it an even card? And you put it in a pile. And so they're doing something where they have to work with information instantly
Mhm.
and be able to respond quickly. And we time them. And we see, can they beat their time? And so that's just a fun way that we go after processing speed in a game-like format. It might not even be in a student's programming. It's something we can do as a break, but it feels challenging. And then we do work with processing speed at our learning center. We have a few programs that work on processing speed. But it does take development. It does involve a lot of timing and speed regulation and just really working with the timing center of the brain.
All right, that's great. Elizabeth says, thank you. That was so helpful. So glad to hear that was helpful. And then we did have a question from Krista. She's wondering, how would you find an expert in my area to help with these skills? She did mention she is from Kentucky, and she's also open to like book recommendations as well.
Off the top of my head, I don't have a referral for you in Kentucky. I'll tell you, I'll tell you two really good things to think about. Three, I'll give you three. One is, if you're searching for someone, you want to be looking for someone who speaks the language of neuroplasticity and working with underlying skills. So as you're searching around in your area, that's kind of what you're listening for. There is a consultant, Alexandra Dunnison, who was on our show a couple of weeks ago. What she does is she helps people find people, connect with people that can really help them. And she's got lots of contacts all over the world. She knows how to research in your area. So she would be a good reference. And the other thing you can do is to give us a call and talk about remote learning, because we do work with students all over the world.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a question about school accommodations. So it says, what school accommodations would you recommend for, I don't exactly know what this means, but maybe you will, Jill. 2E, 11-year-old boy. I don't know what the PG is, but the ADHD inattentive type, specifically for his executive function skills and deficits.
Well, 2E is twice exceptional. Lauren, is there something that pops into your mind? I've been doing a lot of talking here.
I mean, usually when, especially twice exceptional means that they do have they're gifted, but then they also have a secondary diagnosis like ADHD, sometimes high functioning autism. So there should be either an IEP or an accommodation plan, a 504 accommodation plan in place. And schools, I mean, they are limited in what they can do, especially now with remote learning. It's really challenging. If he's 11 and he might be in 6th grade, if that is middle school, a lot of times middle schools have embedded into their program for kids that are on IEPs or 504 plans, they'll have like what's called life skills or basic skills or something like that, which is really kind of teaching executive function, basic executive function skills, how to use a planner, how to think ahead about future assignments. They'll work with the child. It's usually a smaller size classroom, and it's giving support. I know we have Mona here from Futures Academy. They have a one-on-one school, and they have that also built into their curriculum where they meet with a student and they strategize and they really work to build executive function skills and help the student to be successful. That is the challenge with building executive function skills, is that it usually needs to be one-on-one or very targeted to the child's exact needs. A school isn't going to necessarily work with him to build visualization skills. That's not what schools do. They don't really deal with the underlying skills, but definitely take the accommodations that they have in place, but look to see if he is transitioning into middle school. Look to see if that program is available. Basic skills, life skills, it's called something like that. And it's an extra class that a student would take in lieu of an elective, but it really helps to support them, especially a transition as they transition into middle school or high school.
Yeah, I think at least in California, and I'm not sure if this is a state or a national program, in high schools, possibly middle schools, there's a program called AVID, which does exactly that. It's really building those executive function skills. In terms of accommodations, I think it's going to be kind of those organization things that are going to be so challenging, especially with online learning. Kids get so overwhelmed by everything coming at them. And so really what students need to learn is how to, one, get it organized on their planner. They need to know how to use a planner and get it on there, understand what they're looking at, and then they need to learn how to break it up. And so if there is, that the kind of accommodation that your child probably needs is, for someone to help structure, teach, and then monitor him using a planner and breaking assignments up. And as Lauren said, that usually takes some one-on-one help. But certainly there should be a way, if he didn't get everything written down, or, where he can go back and check online exactly what he's supposed to do. And in just a minute, I'm going to give you a strategy, a problem-solving strategy. And using this strategy together, you could sit down and work him through, how to use it. And then, as long as there's a place where he can go back and check.
Great. We've got so many great strategy opportunities for people to try. A lot of people really like the card suggestion. Elizabeth was mentioning that she's excited to use this to kind of build that feeling of the sense of urgency. So yeah, she really liked that one. And then Carolyn really appreciated that as well. She's wondering, are there more artistic and game activities that can work on building this visual and auditory memory skill as well? Maybe something music related. Does anything pop out to you?
If you think about the concept of what we're talking about visualizing and then being able to take your mental image and change it in some way. And we're talking about hearing something in your mind. So anytime that someone is able to, that you can stimulate them to picture something and then talk about it, you're building those skills. And so it could be with any medium, anything that you're doing, really, if you keep those two ideas in mind, and then extending it with manipulating it. Oh, picture what it would look like if you put green in there instead of blues, and see if they can, change that in their mind.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Awesome. I did notice a question about if this would be available to watch later. And yes, the videos are always available later on our YouTube channel. I believe on Facebook too as well, right, Lauren?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they're always available to watch later if in the case you have to leave or something. And then we had a couple people chiming in on the whole topic of medication. Tracy's wondering, what are your thoughts about ADHD medication for executive functioning challenges? If kids are taking such medications, does this impact our work with them on these skills? It's a good question.
So we are not medical experts and we can't give medical advice truly, but we will work with kids however you bring them to us. And so if they are on medication and that, with your doctor is the best thing for them, then that's how we're going to work with your child. If it's during the summer and you don't want them on medication, we're happy to work with them without their medication as well. What we see functionally is diagnostic for us, and we can go from there. I guess I would, there's just a lot to consider with attention and executive function. And the big thing is knowing, really understanding if there are other skills that are getting in the way and stressing that attention or keeping the student from being able to really do those higher level skills. And, there are times where medication is actually, very workable for some students, and for others, not so much. We really focus on the training aspect, and often find that with the training, they're able to do the kinds of things that they need to do.
Right. And just to chime in a little bit, my student that I referenced earlier, Nicholas, so he was on 2 different types of attention medication. Attention medication might make him less impulsive, less like emotionally reactive, but it's not going to train his visualization skills that we're lacking. Mm-hmm. So yes, you can use medication to change the functions in the brain. But if underlying skills are lacking, they need to be developed as well.
Right.
So, and that's why we do the training that we do.
Yeah. And Dr. Ted Hallowell, who is an expert in ADHD, he really has said that a good combination of medication and training, that you don't want to leave that training piece off, because there's a lot of learning that has to happen. And certainly with executive function, these are life skills. This is how we solve problems, how we manage. So we need to develop and learn these skills.
Definitely. That's a great point. We have just a few more questions and comments. One, this was asked back, I think, when we were giving some suggestions for tools we can use for students on visualization and interlanguage. And then we had a question from, I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing the name wrong. I think it's Yothi. She says, what if they don't want to listen? So any thoughts on that one?
So many thoughts came into my mind. One thing is, we do want to make sure that we get their attention, we use a calm voice, that we talk to them about more than just things they have to do or things that they have not done right. Kids, especially teenagers, they don't really want to listen if all they're going to get is a laundry list. And so, try to set up listening as a positive thing. I am going to, in just a minute, talk to you about that problem-solving strategy. And really, to me, I feel like you can apply it to all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then we had just one more comment. This was Christina chiming back in. She was the one who had mentioned before that she had struggled. She had really great pictures in her head, but kind of struggled like putting the thoughts together into words. She mentioned that she's 45 now, but she remembered when she was about 12, she started recognizing that this was a challenge and worked to improve it. She would get frustrated when people asked her to prove something from a previous argument, and I could only remember my emotional impressions and the scene, but not the words. So I noticed I had mental word thoughts about things. Any additional thoughts on that experience?
I heard an interesting technique just yesterday, actually. And it was about taking the emotion out of words to notice some things. So maybe, just kind of in your environment, saying in your mind, there's a chair. I'm walking around a corner. I'm going through the kitchen. I notice the refrigerator is cold. Just feeding yourself some language that's not heavily emotionally laden. And then, kind of training yourself as you're making pictures, because you're getting all of the emotion, you're getting all the feeling part of it, which is great. And so then as you're making pictures, to say the nouns that are in there, say what you notice, the things that you notice, the most important thing that you notice. What is that thing doing or that person doing? And consciously state it as opposed to digging into the emotion. So often with students, we have to go the opposite direction and try to build in an understanding of the emotion behind it. So you're kind of going the opposite direction.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Jill. And thank you everyone for your amazing comments. I love to see, I could tell people were kind of like chiming in off of each other's comments. So that's great. And then if you do want to connect with other people who, you know, might be going through the same thing as you might be able to relate to some of your children's challenges, definitely check out our Facebook group, Mom Squad. And that's where our peace meeting is going to be held. So you'll definitely want to join in on that, and you'll be able to connect with families and learn a lot more.
Thank you, Maddie. This is LD Expert Live. I'm Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers, talking about executive function with Lauren Ma. To wrap up today, and I really hope you'll stick with us just for a couple more minutes, I want to give you that problem-solving strategy that you can use with your children to tackle any problem. You know, this pandemic has actually presented us with a unique opportunity to problem solve together with our kids. Instead of running around trying to get our kids to all different activities, families are stuck at home, and you're getting a firsthand look at challenges that you might not have noticed before. So what you want to do is you want to dialogue about whatever that challenge is. Maybe it's managing to get your kids onto their online classes with limited space or devices. Maybe it's getting your child to actually stop and listen. Maybe they're really struggling to stay engaged, or they're playing games on their Zoom classes. Whatever it is, identify and label the challenge. And then together with your kids, strategize, brainstorm all the possible solutions that they could try. And then that you all could try, actually, not just them. And then together, kind of, you know, get them down to just one, decide on one that you're going to try, and then commit to trying it out. And for the next couple of days, maybe till the end of the week, everybody tries that strategy. And then you revisit it and you evaluate, did it work? If it did, great. High five each other and keep doing it. If it didn't, then dialogue. What didn't work? What part worked? What didn't? What do we need to do to change it? And then commit to trying it again. This problem-solving strategy, it takes some time, and it should definitely be done at a neutral, non-emotional time. But it's really well worth the time. You know, I was thinking about the person who asked about how do I get them to listen? You know, and a lot of times teenagers, they don't really want to listen to their parents too much. But you know, if that's the problem, then you sit down and say, you know, sometimes there are really important things I need to tell you, and I feel like you're not listening. And that has to change. So let's brainstorm it. Let's see. And maybe, you know, your kid says, hey, I am listening. I'm just looking at my phone. Or I can't listen if there's other things going on. I mean, you're going to be able to start to dig out what else is around that problem. But you know, as a parent, what has to happen, what has to change. But together, dialogue, this has to change. But how can we do that? How can we figure this out together? And then, you know, try it. Because when your child is a part of the process, especially your teens, they feel some ownership and control, and it builds their executive function and problem-solving skills. So instead of you just telling them how it will be, I mean, you probably have a good solution in your mind, but instead of you just telling them how it will be, together you're going to figure it out, and then commit to trying it. Talk about how it worked, celebrate a little bit that, you know, look at what we did, it worked. So give it a shot. Your kids will feel more ownership, more control. It'll build their executive function and problem-solving skills. Well, Lauren, do you have any last nuggets on this very important topic for our viewers?
Yes, and I've been saying it throughout the show, and we've been saying it throughout the history of this broadcast on LD Expert Live. Get to the root of the problem. So if you see executive function challenges in your child, you'll need to do some exploration to make sure you're dealing with the root of the problem. Don't just assume it's, oh, they need to learn how to use a planner. You need to make sure that those underlying skills are solid and in place so that you're actually dealing with the root of an executive function challenge.
Thank you, Lauren. You always have so much great information for us. This is LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning disabilities, dyslexia, and attention challenges. We're live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Next Tuesday, in honor of it being the holiday season, we have a quick show for you featuring 5 life-changing gifts for yourself and the whole family. I can't wait to share them with you. Be sure to join us next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Stowell Learning Centers are open for remote sessions and screenings, so you can access our services wherever you are in the world. We are also seeing students on site with all of the COVID precautions. We work with children and adults doing targeted brain training to improve thinking and learning. If you would like a free consultation for yourself or your child, give us a call or visit our website at stowellcenter.com. Thank you, Lauren, for joining me today. You always have tremendous insights to share. And a big, big thank you to all of you who have been sharing, subscribing, joining us each week, either live or on the replay. It's so much fun to connect with you. We'll see you all next week.